said that we talked the other days about the Articles of Confederation failing and how they decided they were going to call for a convention. So we're going to start with the convention and find out where it was held, who was invited, and so on. So on 228, it says the Constitutional Convention is called. So what was one of the final straws, I guess, that happened under the Articles of Confederation that really led them to start thinking it's time to get a new government? What was it that really happened, like the final straw that broke it, Dev? ch8sec Rebellion. Those farmers that rose up against the government, they didn't like how that, that was going against the government. So they decided, they had a group of guys, about 5 states met in Maryland to discuss certain things about what was going on. And finally, they decided it was necessary for them to call a convention and get all the states involved. And where did they say this was going to be held and when, Hunter? Philadelphia. And when were they going to probably get together and meet? Anybody know when they were going to get together and meet? Max? Yes, of what year? Brennan? 1787. All right, ch8sec Rebellion took place in late 1786, and they decided, they kind of feared a rebellion was going to happen, so they had states send delegates to a meeting in Philadelphia, which would be held in the summer of 1787, and they sent, each state, except for one, sent delegates to this meeting, and which state refused to participate and send any delegates, Nick? Rhode Island. All right, Rhode Island refused to send delegates because they were happy with how the government was run. They were happy that the states had the most power. They didn't want the national government to have more power than it had, so they refused to send governments. They thought if things changed, it would be for the large states, and Rhode Island being such a small state, the smallest, mind you, they were worried that it would be bad for them, so they refused to even participate. They were happy with the way things were. So 12 states, the other 12 states sent delegates. They were going to meet. They were going to meet here at the Pennsylvania State House. And again, we will go there. If you look over, it's now called Independence Hall. Okay, if you look at the little reading on the right hand of 229, it says, Pennsylvania State House, where the Constitutional Convention took place, is now called Independence Hall. It is protected as part of a national park in Philadelphia. The State House itself was the site where George Washington received his commission to lead the Continental Army, and where the Declaration of Independence was signed. The Liberty Bell is nearby. It's just across the street, basically. Many visitors come to Philadelphia to stand in the building where much of America's early history as a nation was made. So, like I said, we'll go here, and here's the street, across the street, right over here is the Liberty Bell. And then there's, like, Constitution Hall over here, so we'll kind of tour this whole area and get to go inside where they actually had this meeting. So the convention... Philadelphia, 12 states sent delegates. Let's talk about these delegates. All right? And that's on the part that says the convention's delegates on 229. What did they call this meeting that was held in Philadelphia? It was one of your terms. What was the name of the meeting, Cooper?
The Constitutional Convention.
The Constitutional Convention. It became known as that. A very, very respected group of people, men, that were sent there. And how many delegates from these 12 states were sent there? Dev?
55.
55. Okay, when we get, it's a room probably the size of this, maybe smaller, that 55 men were in for months trying to figure out how to organize their government. And of the 55 delegates that were sent, what type of people were they? Types of jobs did they hold? Austin? Yeah, so if you take a look at that, you've got a very impressive, respected group of men, doctors, lawyers. Now, lawyers, half of them were lawyers. This document is kind of all based on law. So lawyers wrote this document. You've got doctors and merchants. These people are very well-educated people. Many of them, 3/4 of them, were part of the original Continental Congress. Many of them worked on writing their state constitutions and were leaders of their country. Do you need help?
Yeah, I don't know anything about it.
It says no connection. Imagine that. Keep trying to connect around here. If it stops moving like that, it means it's connected. So it might connect. Okay, so like I said, very impressive group. What did they call these men? They called them. They had a specific name. We still refer to these men like this today, Max. They are known as the Founding Fathers. So whenever you're listening to the news or anything, they say the Founding Fathers. They're referring to these 55 men that got together and wrote our Constitution. They're our Founding Fathers. They founded our country. And we call these delegates the Founding Fathers or even just the Founders. And very famous people were part of this group, people that will eventually become president or scientists, very wise men. Give me a couple names that you saw in there of people. Hunter? Ben Franklin. Brett? Madison. Matthew? Washington. Any others? Max? Okay. Cooper? Jefferson was not there. As a matter of fact, the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence was not there. Where was Thomas Jefferson during this time? Obviously, he would have been a person that would have been there, but he wasn't around. Where was he, Austin?
He was overseas at the diplomatic post.
Yes, he was over in France serving as an ambassador, and he looked at the list, and he's like, wow, this is a nice list. There's a lot of very impressive people on this list. So he would have been part of that, but again, he was overseas. John Adams was overseas. He was doing the same type of thing that Thomas Jefferson was. So two very famous people that you would think would be there. They were not. So here's three names of people that were there. You've got George Washington, Ben Franklin, and Madison. Two of those men will become president. Ben Franklin, we all know he accomplished quite a bit in his life. He was a famous scientist. He'll be the oldest man at the convention, actually. After James Madison, I put in parentheses, he is known as the father of the Constitution. He's the father of the Constitution. Read a little bit more about the delegates. Most of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention owned property, and most of them were born in America. They represented a number of occupations, including doctors, merchants, and generals. 35 were lawyers or had legal training. More than half of the delegates had attended college. The average age of the delegates was 44. Ben Franklin was the oldest at 81 years old, and the youngest delegate there was 26 years old. All right, so it's an interesting group of people that you had. But like I said, James Madison will be known as the father of the Constitution. He pretty much writes the whole thing, actually.
Wait, how old was Franklin when he died?
He'll probably die, I don't know, he might make it 5-10 more years. He's an old man. He's 81 right now at the convention. So pretty old man to be able to do something like this. Okay, I'm going to show you a video clip. This is about James Madison, actually. It's actually no talking whatsoever, so a lot of reading, so pay close attention. It's good. Did you know? It's interesting because this guy is the size of Austin as an adult. You short? What do you weigh? 100?
90.
Yeah, he's about your size.
Who?
James Madison,
Really?
father of the
Is he
Constitution.
a dwarf?
It's not a dwarf.
Let's decorate.
It's not a dwarf.
Yeah, I'm 5'1".
It's not.
Way
Just take notes.
Way taller than a dwarf.
Leave
A
it.
dwarf is this tall.
A dwarf is less than 5 foot.
How about that?
No, kids aren't considered dwarfs if they're that size.
Have to be 4'8", I think, or something around there.
4'8", 4'9" would be considered it, not including children that are adults. Alright, after this commercial, we're going to watch. Alright, pay attention. Guys, here we go. Watch the video. Epileptic means he has seizures. Very frail little guy. Oh, of course. 5'4". Short little guy. I'm 5'5"-ish. 100 pounds. Come on. That's right. Well, you're not going to forget it.
You don't have to read so fast.
He was what?
Small.
All his life.
Don't. If it does this a few more times. Yeah, there's a commercial with that song. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're done.
Time's up.
Alright. Well, sorry. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. That's probably why you're having trouble connecting to the internet right now, too. So, anyway, that talks a little bit about how James Madison basically wrote the entire Constitution with the help of all these guys, but he had a lot to do in the convention, so that he is known as the father of the Constitution. What they're trying to show you there is he's a short little guy, 5'4", 100 pounds, very frail, epileptic, meaning he had seizures quite often, very quiet and shy guy, and look what he turned out to be. He wrote the Constitution, he becomes the president of our country, and so on. So it's just kind of showing you what he can do, what a lot of people could do. So let's take a look on 229 and 230 about the delegates assembling. Okay, so they arrived in Philadelphia. Actually, make sure you're on 230, I would say. When they showed up, most of them thought they were going to basically change some things in the Articles of Confederation. Others said, well, we need to make an entirely new plan. They all agreed that they needed to make sure they protected people's rights. And so that was the most important thing to them, was they wanted to protect people's rights. Right? And what did they say about the government? What did it have to be? What type of government did we have to have? What kind of government, Dev?
Republicanism.
Republicanism, which is by the people. But what else? What other type of government? Because before, all the states had the power. What type of government? Take a look in that reading on 230. See what it says to you. What type of government should we have? We know it's a republicanism, yeah, but what did they say about it, Brett? I don't see you looking too much. Abby?
A government that can maintain order.
Yeah, we wanted it to maintain order. What else about the government? Keep looking. Keep looking. What type of government should we have? Brett?
The government had to be strong enough to protect people's rights, but not strong enough to be controlled.
Okay, so they wanted a strong government, but they didn't want it to be too strong so that it was unable to be controlled. So they wanted a strong government. So that was something that was a challenge to them. They had to figure out how to make a strong government, but limit it so it doesn't become too powerful. They met together. Not all of them arrived at once because they had to get there, most of them by horse and carriage. But at least 2 delegates from about 7 states arrived May 25th, 1787. So when they first started, there were about 29 people there to start. So since they had enough, they officially started it, and then eventually the others trickled in. Okay, so May 25th, 1787 is when the convention officially began, and here's some pictures of some of the people under attendance. So take a look at the convention begins. All right. Take a look in there. I'm going to give you a few seconds to read through that because I want to make sure you know what's going on. And I want you to be able to find out, what are some things that they did first off before they even started working with the government. What are some things they did first? So why don't you read through that immediately, basically the first order of business. Jacob? Elect a president of the convention. They wanted to do that immediately. The number one order of business was to elect a president of the convention so that they had somebody that was in charge. All right, Emily, who did they elect to be president of the convention?
Robert Morris.
No.
Or George Washington.
George Washington. So I want you to keep in mind he's not president of the country yet. He is president of the convention. Everybody voted for him because he was very admired and respected. Okay. Now, that was number one. I mean, it took a while to get this taken care of. Next order of business was to do what? What did they have to do next? What did they say? Well, this is what we're going to do next. What's their next order of business, Lindsay? After they... What?
The rules for the convention.
They decided that, all right, we need to come up with some rules. Well, that makes sense. You don't want it to be crazy and out of control. You had to come up with some rules for the convention. So what were some rules that they said for the convention? Max?
All windows must be closed.
Okay, all windows must be closed. It needed to be held in secret. Katie?
Guards had to be posted at the doors.
Guards posted at the doors, so that helped keep that secret. Brooke, what else?
When the door was open, the delegates stopped talking.
If someone opened the door, they immediately stopped talking so no one would hear what they were talking about. What else? Matthew, what else did they say was part of their rules?
They were to be able to consider all ideas and be able to change sides and debate.
Good. Can't change sides. Consider all ideas. And there's one other one that they kind of talked about too. Had to do, Dev?
But there's, oh wait, never mind.
It had to do with being pressured on certain politics of the day. So no pressure, basically. So let's talk about the first one. Consider all ideas. Anybody that had an idea? Okay. Anyone that had a thought or an idea on things should be able, their ideas should be considered. All right? You put it down. You don't just blow them off right away. You consider their ideas. If you wanted to change sides in a debate, you should have been able to do that. Just because you had your opinion, you may have been swayed, so you were able to consider change sides on that. No pressure on politics of the day. They didn't want things that were going on out in the country during that time to pressure their decisions on one way or another. Because of that, they decided to keep it completely secret. So to ensure the privacy, they kept the windows shut. It's summertime. There's no air condition. They don't wear shorts and t-shirts back then. All right? So it's going to be very, very hot. They posted guards outside the doors because everyone knew what was going on, so people wanted to know. Kept guards outside the door. When the doors opened up, the delegates stopped talking. So as soon as they approved all of these rules, they got down to business. A little more about kind of private sessions today. Most things that are held at Congress are open to the public, but they do have the right today to hold private sessions. One reason for that would be the threat to national security. So that would be why certain things would be private. But today, anybody can go sit and watch the House of Representatives meet or the Senate meet. So those can happen still today. So the rules, they're all good to go. We're ready to get started. So now, the first thing they wanted to do was design an entirely new national government. George Washington was in charge. Now each state kind of sat together as themselves. So kind of like this, you guys are in tables, it would be like you guys are representing a specific state. They all sat together and discussed their different thoughts. And if you wanted to speak, George Washington as president had to recognize you. And so a guy from Virginia, Edmund Randolph, he spoke once before, we talked about him. He had a plan. Him and his people from Virginia had come up with an idea, and they called it, obviously, the Virginia Plan. So George Washington let Edmund Randolph stand, speak, and share with him what the Virginia Plan was all about. Now, James Madison was from Virginia, too, so he was part of this thought. So tell me what were things that they said, this is what we think that our government should look like. What did the Virginia Plan state? Matthew?
It would have 3 branches. The first branch of government would be the legislature, which makes laws. The second was the executive, which enforced the laws. And third was the judicial, which executed.
Okay, good. They wanted a type of government that would have 3 branches. All right, they proposed this, and they thought this would work out because then no part of the government would be too powerful or become more powerful than the other. So like Matthew said, the first branch of government that they had recommended would be called the legislature. And the legislature would be the group of people that make laws. Today, we have 3 branches of government. We have a legislative branch, that's your Congress. That would be your House of Representatives and your Senate. So representatives and senators, they are the ones that make the laws. So branch number 1 would have been legislature. They then said, okay, we have a second branch of government. We want to call our second branch of government the executive branch, and the executive branch enforces the laws. We have that branch today. Today, the executive branch includes the president. That's the executive branch, so he enforces the laws. And then they said, okay, here's our third branch of government. We think the third branch of government, we call it the judiciary branch, which interprets the laws, and that's what we have today as well. The judicial branch is the Supreme Court, where they actually interpret the laws. Okay, so they threw out this plan. Yes?
So it's like the legislatures make the laws, but then the executives go over it, and then the judiciary.
Well, yeah, and so sometimes you have court cases at the Supreme Court, and they decide whether or not that's constitutional or not.
So like Snowden White, would he be at the Supreme Court? Would he his court, if he came back to America, would he have his court date there?
Yeah, most likely. Brett?
Which one's the president on?
Executive. So let me write them down if you want. This is Congress. This is the president. This is the Supreme Court. Now remember, these are ideas. It didn't get official right away. So going into the legislature, though, they had something else to go along with this, the legislature. What did they say about the legislature? They proposed another part of the plan that went along with legislature. What else did they say kind of goes along with this? Keegan, what do you got for legislature? What did they say? This is what we propose about the legislature. Deb?
With 2 houses, and in the both houses, the number of representatives from each state would be based on the state's population as well.
Good. They said, okay, so they threw out the 3 branches, and then they came back and let them know we also propose our legislature would be 2 houses. And when you have a 2-house legislature, you call it bicameral for 2 houses. And what they stated was both houses, all of this, the number of representatives would be based upon population. So let's jot a couple things down. I would make sure I knew that this meant bicameral is a 2-house legislature. So they said 2 houses, and they would be based on the number of representatives each state got is based on population.
That was one of the terms.
Which one was?
Two-house legislature.
Oh, bicameral was?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this based on population, what states would this satisfy or make happy? Austin?
The larger ones.
The large states. They happy. So, this is proposed, it's thrown out there. Now it's time to debate it because not every, people don't like certain things. So you had people from the small states standing up saying, this is not fair. We will have barely any representatives because we don't have as many people. So they obviously opposed this plan. The smaller states were like, well, this is not fair. The larger states are going to end up controlling everything and ruling the others, and it's just not fair. Small states stood up and stated things. People from Delaware, they wanted to explain why they were upset and had concerns with this. And so you can't just stand up in something like this and say, I don't like it. Okay, tell us why, and then offer another plan to go along with it. So that happened. And the small states kind of threw out an alternative plan, similar but an alternative plan. And what did the plan that the small states come up with? What did they call their plan? Okay, the larger states came up with this Virginia plan. What did the small states call it, John? New Jersey plan. So, New Jersey delegate William Patterson presents an alternative. So a couple weeks later, he stands up. He's called upon by George Washington, and he says, "Well, we have a alternative plan that we kind of want to throw out there." And they were happy with the three branches, so that they liked that. But instead of having a bicameral legislation, which is two houses, what type of legislature did they want to have, Lily?
They wanted the legislature to have one house.
A one-house legislature, which would be called, if a bicameral is two, what would a one-house legislature be called? What? You need to have a little prefix there. What'd someone say it? Uni. U-N-I, unicameral. Unicameral. So they have one house legislature, and what did they say about representation? Okay, the Virginia plan said, however many representatives you get is based on population. What did this one say? What did this one say? Marley? Yes, equal representation. So it was not based on population, it was equality. This plan was very similar to the Articles of Confederation. Alright, so turn it to 232, we debate a couple weeks and do some debating, and finally they voted on which plan would be the framework. Alright, so they voted on June 19th. Framework of the Constitution. It's time to vote. June 19th, they vote which plan won to become the framework, Leah? The Virginia plan won the vote. But the rest of the month, they were all upset about the representation. They knew they needed to fix this problem, so they debated back and forth. They were upset. They were yelling and screaming, and it was a mess. And finally, there's 55 people, so they said, okay, we're going to get a small committee together that's going to try to work this situation out and try to see if we can come up with some form of compromise. And they get them all together. The small committee comes up with a compromise. They bring the compromise back to the larger group. And what do they call this compromise, Keegan? The Great Compromise, or what would another name for it be? Dev? Connecticut, because it came from some delegates from Connecticut. So the committee comes back and they say, okay, we've got a compromise. Here is what we say. We're going to make the small states happy. We're going to make the large states happy. So tell me what they threw out there to everybody. How are they going to make everybody happy? Matthew?
To satisfy the smaller states, each state would have an equal number of votes in the Senate, and for the larger states, the committee set representatives in the House and Representatives according to state constitution.
Good. We'll come back to that. Okay. They tried to make both sides, small states and large states, happy. So they said, all right, they're going to keep the two-house legislature, the bicameral legislation. And they said one house will be called Senate, and it will be based on equal representation, meaning each state in the country would have 2 senators. That would be equal. No matter what size state you are, every single state will get 2 senators. All right. Then they said, well, now our second house will be called the House of Representatives, and this will be based upon population. So depending on how big of a state you are or small of a state you are, that tells you how many senators you have, or representatives you have. How many representatives do we have? Nope. 4. We were at 5, but we just got bumped down to 4 a couple years ago, or last year. We have 4 representatives.
Well, why did we get bumped down?
Why would you think we would get bumped down? What's it based on? It's based on population. So the last census, our population went down, meaning because our population hit a certain number, we got bumped down. If it gets back up there, we're going to get that. So they had to reorganize the boundaries of these representatives too. Austin? Oh, 3. The minimum number you can have is 3. No one can have less than 3. So Rhode Island has 3. And does anyone know how many California has?
55. Just kidding.
53. California has 53.
Wow.
Because were you thinking of how many electors they have?
Yep.
Yeah, they have 55 electors, and you add, for electors you add the representatives plus senators. So California has 53 representatives, while we have 4, and Rhode Island has 3. Okay, but California only has 2 senators, so that's kind of how they satisfied everybody to make the small states happy and the big states happy. And it's like that today. This kind of is what it looked like. You don't have to write it down or anything, but it kind of shows you. It's like a Venn diagram, shows you Virginia plan, New Jersey plan, what they both have in the middle. So it did. It satisfied everybody. They were very happy. They voted finally on it. July 16th, it passed.
Are we considered a small state or like a middle state?
Small. Yeah. For as far as that's concerned, yes, we're a small state. California would be considered.
Well,
Now think about Alaska.
Yeah, but they don't have a population.
No, they don't.
That's why
They're the largest state here, but they don't. No, they have 3. I think they only have 3.
How many electoral votes do they have?
3 plus 2 is 5. So, do you see people go to, when you're listening to where the president or the people that are running for president go, do you hear Rhode Island much?
No.
Do you hear Alaska much?
No.
You do hear Iowa. They come here to Iowa because we are the first state that votes in the primaries. And what else do we have that's very important in this country?
something that aims at it.
Agriculture, which is big. What did you say?
There's like some big thing in Iowa, right? At Ames.
College?
No, there's like,
I don't know. They come here. Agriculture's big, which is important to the Midwest. So if they can get Iowa, it's kind of an important state to get.
Vice President came through last year, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so did Obama was here. They all come here. New Hampshire's a big one too because they're one of the first ones to vote on primary night. Okay, so that's great compromise. Now they sit and it's time to get going and figure out. Let's do it. Let's write it because that took like 2 months. Now they have to write it. Okay, and eventually they get to slavery. Okay, we're not going to go through every single thing that they talk about. When we read the Constitution, we'll look through that and we'll read it. It's a very hard document to read and understand, but we'll read it. Well, slavery was an issue because since the House of Representatives was based on population, that meant, well, the people in the South had a lot more people because what did they have more of? Slaves. So that meant they had more population. Well, the people in the North said, no, you cannot count slaves as citizens and part of your population because you don't even consider them citizens. So why would you count them as part of your population? And they try to argue they are part of our population, but, you know. And so it became a problem for representation, and it also became a problem for how it would be taxed. Would these guys be taxed, and would it be taxed based on the numbers? So we have to get together, figure out what to do. They came on another compromise. Lots of compromises in the Constitution. What was the compromise they came up with? Abby?
3/5.
It was called the 3/5 Compromise. And what did the 3/5 Compromise say about slavery? Bo? What did the 3/5 Compromise say about slavery?
They would direct,
Hunter, you want to help out?
Yeah. The 3/5 compromise. 3/5 of the slave population would not count.
Would count.
Would count against that.
Okay, so you guys have 5 people here. You guys are all slaves. Bo, Keegan, John, you count towards the population, you two don't. Alright? So that's how they did it. So they took the entire populations of slaves in that state, and 3/5 of them counted towards the population, the others did not. That was a compromise because the people in the South wanted those slaves to count while the people in the North didn't, so they came up with a compromise, and that's what they did. So when doing representation, they used this. When doing taxes, they used this as well. Another thing they had a debate about was slave trade. Again, in the North, they were already outlawing slave trade. Some were banning completely slavery altogether in the North. The people in the South did not. Having slaves was important to them, and slave trade was important to them. So they wanted to be able to trade slaves back and forth. What did they come up with for slave trade? Trading slaves. What did they come up with? What was their compromise, or did they have a compromise? Did they agree on anything? Was it banned? Was it not banned? What about slave trade? Look in that book. Nick, tell us about slave trade. What did they decide? They had a compromise again. Yeah, Dev.
It wouldn't ban the slave trade until 1808.
All right, they said they worked on a compromise that they would let the slave trade kind of hang around for a little while, and they would ban it in 1808. So it was a little while for them, about 20 years, that they were going to have slave trade still. And they agreed upon that in the end of August. They talked about regulating trade as well. They made it so that Congress was able to regulate trade or promote trade. Finally, they finished the whole deal, and they continued to meet in through September. So they started in the end of May, and they went through September, and finally voted on the final form of their Constitution. When did they vote on their final form of the Constitution? What day did they vote? Brett?
September 15th, 1787.
They voted September 15th, 1787. On Sunday, it was written out on 4 sheets of that thick parchment paper. So that back there is on 1 sheet, but they put it on 4 sheets. Monday, all but 3 delegates signed. So Saturday's the 15th. The 16th was Sunday when they put it on parchment paper. On Monday the 17th, all but 3 delegates signed it. And then it went to all the states to approve it. We consider September 17th to be Constitution Day. Okay, that was the day they signed it. 3 delegates chose not to. They didn't like it. They weren't happy with it, and so on. It was sent to each state with a letter from George Washington. It was sent to each state to ratify, or what does ratify mean? Approve it. And it went to those states. Now, next section we'll read about this debate because it becomes a huge debate. But obviously it gets ratified. We know that because it's our current form of government. Take a look at 233, the now and then at the top. Preserving the Constitution. Now and then. The National Archives is responsible for preserving the 200-year-old sheets of parchment on which the original Constitution was first written. 4 sheets. It's there. It's in the National Archives. The archive stores the document in an airtight glass case enclosed in a 55-ton vault of steel and concrete. Every few years, scientists examine the pages with latest technology. For the last examination in 1995, they used fiber optic light sources and a computer-guided electronic cameras designed for space exploration. The National Archives was established in 1934, where they put very, very important papers and documents. Not all of them are out on display. They're all over the place. They hold other things such as drawings, maps, letters to military service records. They hold more than 325 billion documents, 5 million photographs, and more than 81 million feet of motion picture film. So the National Archives holds a lot. When you go to the National Archives to view the Constitution, and we'll go there again, we'll stop there. It's a small room. You walk in like a half circle. You stop and look at this document, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, all these documents. The one in the middle is the Constitution. There are guards standing right by it, making sure that it's very protected. It's cost probably, God, what'd they say, $9 million to protect. So it's...
Wait, why would they have so much film?
Why? Those are of importance. I think it's something they wanted to keep in the archives. Those are the archives are to preserve different documents. So old films, that's not us, and things like that they throw in there. Dirty. All right. Any questions about the Constitution? All right. Now it just doesn't get passed just like that. It takes a little while because you can imagine people don't like everything about it. It's tough to get passed right away. Okay, so we will go over that. I'm going to see if this video works. I'm sure it won't.
It will work.
Not here in this grade. Okay.
There's this thing on History Channel that said communists were Nazis, and I watched it.
That's why I was thinking it's that.
They have all of our nations.
Hey, listen up.
Why can't we just skip the video?
Because
It's not YouTube
it's History Channel, you gotta go through it.
for 15 seconds.
It probably won't work, so we'll see if it works.
No, it's even like.
But sometimes it does it on the commercials, but it goes through the videos better. 5 seconds. See what happens. I don't know where they're running off to. Class doesn't get out to.
After signing the Declaration of Independence in 1776,
Of course.
How long is this?
the 13 former American colonies had an identity crisis.
Pay attention. Okay, never mind. Okay, now don't do anything. Listen carefully. Let's see. We get out at 30, right? Or is it 20? 30. Okay, I'm gonna try to see if your group can throw something out on Twitter. Someone from your group come up about something you learned today. If you see someone else posted yours about in front of you, do not post the same thing. So try to get one person from each group.
I